Okay, 2 minutes past. We shall kick off. The room is filling up now. Excellent. Brilliant. Well, I think I am going to kick off. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon for our Disrupt or Die talks. A bit of a scary title. I thought it was one to kind of get us all to stand up and stay alert coming into January and a new year. So we are going to talk through the 5 top tips for disruption and challenger thinking today. My name's Kelly. I am the founder and the creative director of White Bear. And what White Bear do is they make brands impossible to ignore. We're a brand building agency, and what we are super passionate about is challenger thinking and creating that memorable idea that will stick in your customers' minds and ensure that you disrupt and aren't one that has been disrupted. So in our agency, we work with clients of all types, industry agnostic, though we do work with a lot of food and drink, a lot of tech, and fashion as well. In our experience, our team are a team of A players working with some of the biggest brands in the world, from Red Bulls to Unilevers to Deloitte's, and we still work with much of them today as well. But what we really love is knowing how to disrupt them. And helping our challengers cut through the noise, because they won't have budgets as big as the larger incumbents, so they need to outsmart them with really clever branding and positioning. So I'm going to walk you through how we do that today, and then towards the end, I'm going to walk you through how we audit brands. So we audit brands of all sizes, from full rebrands to marginal gains and small improvements. What I'm hoping at the end of this session is that you will be empowered to go away and audit your own brand, no matter what size you are, and find tangible improvements that you can make to make sure that you are disrupting. Great, so we have the room filling up now, so I am going to crack on and start talking. I would welcome you all to please use the chat box as well. I much prefer conversations over presentations. I will be doing a lot of talking, but I would love your feedback and questions, all of that great stuff. So please do feel free to engage. So let's crack on. Brilliant. So has anybody here heard of the White Bear phenomenon? And again, please do use the chat box if you have. I have it open here on my screen. Nobody's chipped in yet, so I'm happy that that gives me a story to start off with. So where did the name come from for our agency? So the term the White Bear phenomenon was discovered by a man named Daniel Wegner, and he was a professor and a psychologist at Harvard. And he had a theory that if you were asked not to think about something, all you could do was think about that one thing. So what he did with all of his volunteers was he asked them not to think about a white bear. And what he found was that not one person could go more than 20 seconds without thinking about that white bear once the seed had been planted. So throughout this talk, and hopefully long after this talk, I want you to all be thinking about what is your white bear? What is that one sticky, memorable idea, story, whatever it might be, that is going to stick in the minds of your customers so that they can't get you out of their minds. And by the end of this session, I'm hoping you will all know what your business's white bear is. So how do you do that? How do you create that disruption in the mind, that memorable moment? Well, I'm going to walk you through that. And as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about the 5 top tips for thinking like a disruptor and creating challenger thinking. So first up is think brave. It's really important that in order to disrupt, we are brave. We need to be challenging the norms. And our brains are wired to understand and retain stories. So Data, statistics, benefits, features, all those things have their place. But what people remember is stories. I always say people won't remember, well, I don't always say, I've robbed this from Maya Angelou, but people don't often remember your name or your face, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So how do you want your business to make people feel? And telling stories is a great way to do that. Think back to caveman time, when stories were people's currency. They gave you credibility, they made you trustworthy, they inspired. So the power of stories cannot be underestimated. If you think about your business, like this chart here, right from inception through to scale, what you will see is that your brand story stays consistent right along that journey, from the minute maybe the founder wakes up and thinks, I'm going to do this, to them selling and exiting after world domination. What you'll see is brand story stays consistent throughout. So in order to disrupt, you need to know your story. You then need to start thinking about your branding. And then as you grow, scale, pivot, add services, change products, etc., that brand story needs to stay consistent, and your MPDs and your services need to align with it. So in order to disrupt, we need to know what our story is. Well, how do we know that? What is our story? You can't sell anything if you can't tell anything. So you need to be able to tell your story with consistency, with emotion, in a tone of voice that's recognizable, with personality, before you can start selling any products. Nobody likes being sold to, but everybody loves telling stories and hearing stories. So a brand story is made up of these 5 pillars, which I am going to walk us through today. We need to get these right in order to be brave. We need to understand why we exist. We need to be able to demonstrate what we are doing. We need to be shouting about the impact and change we want to have. Then we also need to be able to communicate that really succinctly in a value proposition. And we also need to have a really strong set of values that we don't want to hide behind, that we are proud of. So I always describe a brand story much like an iceberg, and similar with the business. I'm sure a lot of you will agree that about 80% of what goes on in a business happens behind the scenes. It's like that bit of the iceberg under the water. And it's only that 20%, maybe even 15%, that actually our customer is faced with. It's landing on our homepage. It's buying a product, engaging with the pack, whatever it might be. That's only the tip of the iceberg. And a brand story works much in the same way. 80% of that brand story needs to be what drives you, your team, your business every day. And then it's only that 20% on top, which is the value proposition, which is communicated really simply to the customer. So again, going back to brand story, starting with our purpose and why do we exist. If anybody hasn't read Simon Sinek's Starts With Why, or if you don't have time to do that, watch his TED Talk. It's so important to understand your why, and to make sure that your team understands your why. So that needs to be defined. I'm sure it's living in somebody's head. Perhaps there's an articulation of it sitting, gathering dust somewhere, but making sure that's up on the wall at the forefronts of people's minds. And mission statement, what are you doing? And vision, what impact and change do you want to have? I often describe this as it's like a treasure map. Your purpose is why you set off on your journey. Your vision is that treasure at the end, that impact you want to have. And your mission is the more tactical, how are you going to get there? Strategic thinking. A great example of a purpose trickling down to every element of the product is Tony's Chocolate Only. They have a goal of 100% slave-free chocolate. And what's really interesting is that actually translates right down to the mold of the chocolate bar. So it's uneven to demonstrate the unequal distribution of wealth across the world. And what's really interesting, because we know these guys, is they said they get these phone calls from parents going, I can't split this bar in half. My kids are fighting over it. It's driving me nuts. Go back to like your standard chocolate bar format. And they're like, no, this is storytelling. This is an opportunity for you to talk to your children about equality and about the disparity across the world of that. And it's a really interesting story to tell, that they're even using the medium of the mold of the chocolate bar to tell that story. So that overarching strategic thinking trickles down into everything that they do. So MRI neuroimagery shows that when evaluating brands, consumers primarily use emotions. Again, talking to that lizard brain. Am I safe? Am I in danger? Straight away, we have these emotive responses to brands. I know personally, if I go shopping while I'm hungry, what I come out with in my shopping trolley is very different to if I don't. So I had these emotional reactions to brands. So remember, we need to tap into emotions, to values, to purpose, to story, in order to build brand loyalty and brand preference, and not be in a race to the bottom in like using performance marketing, for example, to just slash prices, do offers, etc., etc. It's about building that brand awareness. And once we know what our purpose, our vision, and our mission is, we then need to know, how do we tell that really succinctly in a value proposition? This communication of value from us to be delivered to our customer. We need to get that into one line, one memorable line. We're very proud of just rebranding Thrift Plus. That brand is just launched, I think, last week. And in terms of the value proposition, it's really backing the fact that we love pre-loved. And this is a really big shift for Thrift as a brand, who'd always referred to themselves as an alternative to the secondhand shop. Whereas now we're moving towards we're moving towards the language of pre-loved, which is now the defining term for secondhand. We're saying we love pre-loved. We're giving confidence to people to buy pre-loved, and we're straight away communicating the value that we offer. Another great one is Hinge. Hinge's value proposition, designed to be deleted. Straight away, that talks to their commitment to get people off an app and have real live connection and relationships with people that lives much further than just your app, unlike Tinder, who want people to stay on that app forever. So Hinge, designed to be deleted, gives such an insight into the purpose and the vision for this brand. It's really important that we can succinctly communicate that value that we're offering. And those are two big brand promises. But if we drill into even product promises and product value propositions, I love talking about this Burger King example. Burger King came out with this Moldy Whopper campaign last year. I'm not sure if many of you have seen it. We were involved in knowing in the clean label side of things, where Burger King came in and said, we want to strip all of the nasties out of our product. And that reformulation took a long time to ensure that the taste, the mouthfeel, all of that, that stuff that makes a Whopper was kept. But however, all of the nasties were stripped out. So they came out with this campaign of, how do we disrupt the audience, an audience that's used to seeing these shiny Big Macs and Whoppers. What can we do to gain attention, to say that we are now no nasties and free of artificial colors and sweeteners and flavors and all those awful stuff? So what they did was they photographed the Whopper over 28 days and you saw it go off. And yes, it's not appetizing. It makes you go, however, it is memorable. It has sticky power, and the impact that it had was so significant across Burger King. 8.4 billion impressions, 40 million pounds in earned media. Just photographing this Whopper over 30 days, showing real food does go off. Unlike when you throw a pack of cornflakes out into the garden and even the ants won't eat them. A month later, they're still sitting there as fresh as popping out of the box, pretty much. So again, even when it comes to a product, it's like, how do we demonstrate this value in a really arresting, disruptive way in order to cut through? So that first up is thinking brave. I mean, I think that Moldy Whopper campaign is a brilliant demonstration of how they could have gone safe They really could have, but they thought brave in order to create that memorable white bear moment in your mind. So that's my first think brave, first tip. Once we're thinking brave, we also need to think differently. It can't be same, same. And this is where we start to talk about brand and brand application and brand creation. So I always talk about your business being like your castle. So this is your castle that you must protect. And how you protect that is the moat that you build around your castle to stop the invasion of competitors. And this moat is built with IP, with having things you can trademark, you can own that are distinctly yours. So what do I mean when I say building these ownable brand assets? Well, I'm going to talk about them a little bit. And again, when we get to the brand audit at the end of this, which I'm sure many of you are in that position of scaling brands, accelerated brands, you're not in those startup days. It's about making those marginal improvements. You might be really memorable, but you might not be ownable. You might not have plans for scale, however, you've ownable assets. So again, it's not necessarily always about revolution, but often about evolution. And our litmus test for a really successful, iconic brand is that it must be ownable, memorable, and scalable. Well, what do I mean by that? Oh, I love this quote. So if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I love that quote from Henry Ford. And again, this comes back to thinking differently and disruption. And sometimes when it comes to brand, it's so important to test when it comes to services, features, UX, UI, all of that stuff. But when it comes to brand and storytelling, often there can be death by testing. So what I would say is we need to think differently. We need to disrupt. If somebody tested the Nike swoosh and says, what does this say to you? I'm not sure they would say the future of the trainer. I don't think they'd know what to say. So it's really important that we think differently when it comes to brand if we want to disrupt. So ownable, what do I mean by ownable? Well, I mean that we have a unique logo, that we're owning a color, that we have bespoke typography, and that we have an ownable brand language. Not something that is on Fiverr.com 40 of the same logo as us, and that is a big problem when it comes to memorability and recall value. So having a unique logo is so important. And this is where I'm going to ask a few questions. Does anybody recognize these brands? Anybody seen them around? Welcome you to use the chat box. If not, I shall.
Kelly,
Yes,
quick one. The chat box is actually not working, so we've directed people to the Q&A.
Oh, okay, excellent.
So maybe if you could look in the Q&A as you're asking any questions.
Okay. Can people, okay. Oh, yes, we can. Anonymous attendee. Thank you for sending me your answers. Yes. PlayStation, Spotify, Barclays. Absolutely. And we'll get back to some of those questions a little bit later on. But yes, those are the answers. And obviously there's a lot of brand awareness around these brands, but I'm using these to demonstrate a point that they don't have their brand name there. They don't have their product. They don't have a description of what they offer. They're purely an ownable logo mark that is trademarkable and distinct. Moving on to, if you think you have an ownable logo mark, then owning a color in your sector is also super beneficial. It's a really great way to disrupt your aisle or disrupt the world of technology wherever you live. Do an audit of your competitors and see what colors they are using, and can you disrupt? You want to be me first, not me too. So if I'm to tell you these are social media apps, because I'm giving you the sector, can anybody tell me these brands? And I always think the same thing happens every single time I show this. So I'd be intrigued to see what people say. Anybody want to chip in the Q&A, not the chat box? No? Okay, I am going to give you the answers. So what happens is everybody gets Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I always get a ream of answers of, is it Pinterest? Is it YouTube? Is it meetup? Because the red actually isn't ownable in the social media sector because too many people are using it. So it's really important to analyze your shelf, analyze your sector, and to make a decision about how you can be disruptive with color. It's a free way to be disruptive and have standout. We worked with the social media app recently, so we did a bit of an audit of Gen Z apps. And what we found is that they separated themselves into the pinks and the reds, or the blues and the purples, and the outliers, which is no surprise in that they are the most disruptive apps in themselves, but the ones that also take a lot of disruptive brand cues are your Snapchat and your TikTok. Probably because yellow isn't a universally accessible screen color. So people don't use yellow, whereas Snapchat came in and said, we're going to use yellow because we're going to be distinctive and separate ourselves from the competitors. We also have a logo mark. We're going to have a ghost. Which again ties into their product and the a key benefit of their product. So having this logo mark combined with this color palette it enables them to disrupt. So you've an ownable logo mark, you've got an ownable color palette. Then typography. I always say with Coca-Cola, for example, we can see Coca-Cola there on the right, but even if you just saw one letter of that brand, you would know what that brand is. Because it's so distinctive. We have another client at the moment who proudly told us our logo type is an openly accessible typeface that can be universally used. And they were really proud of that because obviously digital first, being an accessible typeface for legibility, is so important, but not when it comes to your logo type. You need to be distinctive. Again, going back to trademarkable IP, you need to be ownable. So typography that isn't openly available to everybody will help separate you from competitors and help separate that confusion and build that memorability and recall value. I always think this is a really good example of typography and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. When Gap rebranded, we all know Gap for that deep navy. We all know Gap for that serif typeface. They were like, whoa, we're going to be really innovative. We're going to go towards this blanding, which is quite a trend that a lot of brands are moving towards. There's benefits, there's merits, there's pains and gains for both. But Gap went to this more sans serif crowd type logo type. And what happened was nobody recognized them. Within a week, they went back to their old logo. They claimed it was a joke, but it really wasn't. They went through a whole rebrand and threw out all the equity that they had in their brand. So rather than evolving, they totally revolutionized for all of the wrong reasons. And what we recognized from the brand and the equity in the type, they threw away without thinking about it. And there's a huge amount of equity in that. So once we've logo mark, we've got logo type, we've got color palette, tone of voice is another way to be different. So I always use these 4 pillars for tone of voice, from funny to serious, from matter of fact to enthusiastic. Again, what is our tone? And I would invite you all, a lot of you've probably done this work, but maybe you're not doing it consistently across every single touch point. What you want to make sure is that your tone stays the same, even when you're talking to different audiences. So you may be saying different things to different people, but make sure you're saying it in the right tone. I mean, these examples, again, instantly we have high recall value for who these brands are. I think that Spotify are brilliant for taking the data. So they're data driven, but then adding emotion and adding storytelling onto the ads that they create, make them really engaging and really memorable. And with this campaign, an insight, obviously we need to base all campaigns on insight. An insight that they had was that millennials use Spotify for new music, that it wasn't perceived that the back catalogue for Spotify is really massive. So they wanted to talk to a certain age group who are listening to new music now, but also we're listening to Spice Girls in '98, for example. So really clever data-driven campaigns that layered on nostalgia, which they did that really well in a really clever tone of voice. Another brilliant tone of voice that I love, that is all over the streets of London at the moment is La Vie. Top left one is right beside our studio, actually. So that's what got them in the front of my mind. But again, using humor as a way to disrupt and start a conversation. I think these guys have a really great playful tone of voice. So just recapping on our second tip, in order to disrupt, we need to be thinking different. Airbnb, another good example of creating a brand that has all of these assets. It has an ownable logo mark that now is internationally recognized and trusted. I mean, such a big job to create a credible, trustworthy brand that started with couch surfing and staying in a randomer's house. How do you build a trustworthy brand that makes people feel comfortable doing that? Well, Airbnb did that in such a brilliant way to communicate we're for everybody, and we're accessible, whether you're going for a 5-star penthouse or you're going to couch surf. There's something there for everybody and you belong. And they did that. They own a color, they have a unique logo mark, they have a great tone of voice, they have a really clear photography style that feels trustworthy. So they're a really great example of that. So then moving on to memorable. So we have an ownable brand, we've all our IP in order. How are we memorable? Great way of demonstrating this is actually products on the shelf. You can recognize the Coke bottle in the dark. I was going to say in the dark and with your eyes closed, but sure, why would your eyes be closed if you're in the dark? But you can recognize that bottle. It's handcrafted, it's ownable, it's unique, much like Toilet Duck, much like Pringles. The medium is the message, and it's not just for FMCG. This also works for all brands. Think about what is that ownable, memorable point of contact between you and the brand, you and your customer, that they will remember. Is it the Coral card from Monzo? Is it the swiping from Tinder? What is it, that one thing that people are going to remember? So once you have your IP and you're being memorable in terms of having a memorable feature, a memorable format, a memorable story, then it's about being scalable. And these things are all really important when it comes to creating a disruptive brand. I think MasterCard are a great example of a huge brand that came across loads of hurdles as the world of finance changed. They based their name on a product, a plastic card. And as the world has pivoted and changed and we've moved towards the world of fintech, MasterCard were in the risk of being left behind because they were just known for the physical card. So how do they position themselves as an innovative brand of the future? Well, firstly, they moved to a lowercase m and c, a very subtle change that they made in 2006, but that was because they wanted to move away from MasterCard being a noun and being a product, and towards being a fintech brand for the future. And then that one step even braver, in 2018 they dropped the MasterCard altogether in their logo mark, and that was a bid to move away and stay current and keep up with the Monzos and the Starlings, etc. of the world. So then our coming on to our third point is think transparent. We're thinking brave, we're thinking different. We then need to think transparently, and this is what our customers want. If people believe they share values with a company, they'll stay loyal to that brand. So no longer the days of his master's voice, where ad agencies told you the product you needed to buy, told you what you needed to look like and how you needed to behave. Now the power lies in the hands of the consumer. With the world of social media and the internet, they are telling us what they want, and we need to listen to them. They also want to know what we stand for as a brand. 61% of Gen Zs believe brands are better positioned than governments to solve social problems. And I think a brand that's done an amazing job of this is Patagonia. This value proposition of Earth is now our only shareholder is just so powerful as they move towards their commitment to helping not helping support climate change, helping work against climate change. And their values underpin this. They don't sell on Black Friday. Every single comms point and activation that they do is underpinned by their values and their purpose as a business. And this is what our customers want. Unlike the inauthenticity of the Pepsi campaign, where Kendall Jenner was holding a generic placard standing for something that no one really cared about, and she didn't even know what she was doing, to be honest. And that really backfired on them because it was so transparent that it was just hopping on a bandwagon. Which is what you don't want to do because you will get caught out now. So thinking transparent, thinking what are our values? How do we live and die by them? How do we employ people who embody them? How do we partner with brands that are aligned with our values? Our customers care about this, and disruptive challenger brands know this and live by this. Then once we know how to think brave, we're thinking different, we're thinking transparent, we need to respond fast. And that's a huge benefit of a challenger brand, being able to respond fast. We don't have massive board members with lots of stakeholder buy-in that we need to get through, lots of red tape before we're ever able to take action. We're able to test things, we're able to respond fast, we're able to talk to our customers. A common denominator for most disruptors is that they didn't start big, but focused on a targeted and unmet consumer need that turned out to have a broad reach. Again, a real benefit of the challenger brand is to be able to tap into this unmet need, these pains and gains of our consumers, and respond quickly with a product or a service that they need and that they have demanded. I love the example of Magic Spoon tapping into a really specific audience that has the nostalgia of cereal in the morning times when you were a kid, sugary cereal with a toy at the bottom, those lovely nostalgic memories. But now we wouldn't necessarily eat cereal because of the high sugar content, but what we're looking for is something high in protein, something low in sugar, potentially something with caffeine. And these Magic Spoon are one of a few examples of cereals that have come out for adults that tap into the nostalgia of the comfort and the taste of home that they want, but also answers the benefits and features that these consumers want. They want high protein, they want low sugar, they want caffeine, for example, and they've tapped into that niche. And once you've tapped into this unmet need, it's about leveraging technology and the technologies that are dramatically disrupting the mass media at the minute. I'm sure we all know who they are, who those apps are. What 3 words? A really great challenger brand did this amazingly with the World Cup. They stepped in really quickly when Japan kicked Spain out of the World Cup, and there was all the debate around, is it in, is it out? What 3 words jumped on that, giving the exact location for the football, and talked about the importance of being precise. So they really jumped on a global moment that we could all connect and relate to. Little Moons during lockdown tapped into TikTok before a lot of their competitors did. They created a Find My Little Moons campaign where you video yourself finding it in a store. 6 million views and 700% growth in a week, which is just phenomenal. And again, it's about tapping into these new technologies, leveraging them and using them, and knowing who your customer is, but knowing what channels they use and how to use those channels. IKEA, a brilliant example of great tone of voice, of using wit to cut through, to be memorable, to have high recall value. And these guys just respond so quickly, and I really enjoy everything that comes from IKEA, a big brand that's kept a challenger mindset. So lastly, tip 5, as a disruptor brand, to make sure you stay relevant, you need to think tribal. It's about building communities, not customers, and develop communities that amplify each audience's engagement and tone of voice. We want to drive people from indifference through to becoming raving fans, enthusiasts, We want to move from brand preference to brand loyalty to brand love. And it's really how we do that is through community and through relatability. Huel are a brilliant example with their tribe of hooligans. In an office, for example, many people, I'm using an office I'm talking specifically about my husband who has a Huel shaker and a Huel t-shirt, and he's always like, well, that guy over there had one as well today. And straight away it's like, we must have aligned values, we must be into the same things. This is a status symbol for what I believe in and what I stand for, and therefore I must be connected with this other person. We must believe in the same things. So creating a tribe of hooligans worked so powerfully for scaling the Huel brand, a D2C brand that didn't have an in-store preference at the time. I know it does now. And it's about creating that community that people want to be part of. So to recap, in terms of how to disrupt, we need to think brave, different, transparent, fast, tribal. And then how do we do that? So you already have a brand. How do you audit that brand and know where we're doing really well in this challenger thinking and where actually we can improve? And as I mentioned, it's not always about evolution or revolution. It can be about evolution. And this is where the brand audit really comes into play. So how does your brand rank against the best? So when we come to looking at a brand and auditing a brand, we break it down into ownable, memorable, scalable. And underneath that, it falls into a number of sectors, from strategic thinking to visual brand to oral brand. And let me walk you through here. So how we rate brands under brand strategy. Do you have a purpose, mission, vision? Do you have values? What are your reasons to believe? Who are your target audience? Do you know them intimately? What's your positioning statement against your competitors? What is your personality? How do you make people feel? And what is your value proposition? So all of these come under strategic. Once we have the strategic bones in place, we want to make sure we're ticking all of these boxes. It's then to think about verbal identity. That's where I talk about ownable assets. So what is our brand name, our product name? Oh, sorry, this is verbal, not visual. Sorry, visual is next. This is verbal. So this is brand naming. Yeah, how do we own a name? How does our SKUs and our products have the same DNA as our brand name? What is the tone of voice and how does it behave? What's that compelling story and that elevator pitch? And then what is that tagline or that value proposition that sums it up? And then visual identity. These are trademarkable assets. So logo mark, typography, owning a color in your sector, having a distinctive iconography style, having a photography style that could be recognized. I always say you could recognize Red Bull's ads every single year because it's so distinctly and ownable to them, and illustration style as well. So all of these boxes should be ticked by you to then say that you have a disruptor brand that's doing all the right things that it can be doing before you jump into campaign, advertising, media spend. Get all your ducks in a row first and make sure you have all of this working as hard for you as it can. Last thing you want to do is splash out first on media spend, not know what you're saying, not look any different to the competitor, and just waste that money, which challenger brands cannot do. So as I mentioned here, moving from ownable, memorable, scalable into these three tangible areas and pillars to then dive into more detail into having a set of all of these assets on your right that will come together to create a really strong brand Bible for you. And it's really important that you have all of these assets. A great example of someone who ticks all of these boxes is Oatly. So many of you might not have seen the original Oatly. It was very unmemorable, low recall value, bad brand bad brand presence, very generic. They moved towards ownable typography. They moved towards having a real positioning statement. They tick all of the boxes of what we've just spoken about, and it totally transformed their business. I love the idea of pack advertisements here. You can see on the bottom right. So any of you who have food brands, use each and every section of that pack to tell your story. Mini advertising that is free. So use it as effectively as you can. And that's what they do. What they really did was they went out as being these heroes. So what type of challenger are you? Are you the irreverent maverick? Are you the local hero? Are you the democratizer? Decide what type of challenger you are and go for it. And what Oatly have done here is they've gone up against dairy. So they said it's milk, but made for humans. So this huge sweeping statement, this challenger mindset of calling out the dairy industry and saying you should not be drinking liquid from a cow. You should be drinking something that is made for humans. And they it had a huge impact on their business. They did then sell out to obviously a massive VC firm that didn't have the best of integrity, which really damaged their brand. But what was really interesting is these guys took this big stance up against dairy, and then in swoop minor figures, challenger thinking again, who are like, yeah, no, we don't want to tell you not to drink dairy. We're actually going to go after the non-dairy drinkers already. And what we're going to go after in that category is taste. We are going to make the absolute best milk to go with your coffee. We are baristas by heart. We know how to make the best tasting oat milk, and we are going to go for that. And they actually have bigger market share now, because they're like, we're not these massive heroes trying to get you to make massive changes. We're minor figures. We're celebrating you having reading your newspaper with the best tasting coffee on a Sunday because you've used our milk. So again, challenger, unsettling challenger. It's about how do we always stay disruptive. So that brings me towards the end of this talk. I hope it has been of some use. What I would like to offer you guys is for the first 3 people who email me there, kelly@whitebearstudio.com, I am going to offer a free brand audit. So what I would love to do is take your brand and walk it through these 3 steps, this litmus test for success, and then rate it. So we have a really cool product that we have created, and that is ownable to us, that will rate your brand against the best, and yeah, give it a rating based on all of the elements that I've just spoken about. So as I mentioned, for the first 3 who shoot me an email, I would love to do that for you. And then let's see if we have any questions.
Yep, we do, Kelly. Will Andrews here says, what's a good way to subtly evolve a brand where certain elements may start to become outdated as new trends reveal themselves?
Yeah, I guess a really good question. And as I touched on, it's not always about revolution. Often it's about evolution. So first thing I would do is sit down, and if you haven't done this, think about your strategy and your positioning. So where do we want to position ourselves? What are our competitors doing? Doing an audit of our competitors. And then once you have that, going back and looking at where your gaps are. Well, am I speaking to the right audience if I want to position myself this way? Am I making sure that I stand out from competitors? So doing an audit of your own brand and asking yourself these questions based on knowing what positioning you want. I would always say brands are for life, not just for Christmas. So you want to build a brand that's set up for the vision as you scale. A lot of brands fall into pitfalls of following trends. From a brand asset point of view, I'd say we don't want to follow trends. We want to create something that is iconic, that is timeless, and that is ownable. However, when creating products, obviously we need to tap into, for example, if you're in food, we need to be tapping into the conscious consumer. We need to be aware of the demands for healthier products, the demands for lower sugar. So we need to tap into product Trends, absolutely. But when it comes to building your brand, I wouldn't build a brand based on a trend of a moment, because what will happen is you're going to end up reinventing the wheel every 2 to 3 years. And that is really bad for building brand awareness. I hope that answers your question, Will. If it doesn't, happy to have a longer conversation.
Okay, and I've got Manish. Manish, I hope you're well.
Oh, my pal.
It's been too long. Manish says, at what stage should a company come to you?
Okay, so a company can come to us at any stage. We may well tell them they're not ready for us, but they can come to us at any stage. Often the clients that we work with currently are the brands that have been around for 2-3 years, who have an MVP, who have done a certain amount of testing, who have an idea of maybe currently what isn't working in terms of brand, product, or service. They have an understanding of their challenges. And then we can come in and help position them for scale and for growth. So where we add the most value is when there is already a little bit of traction going on, there is an MVP, and it's about maturing, and it's about being ready for that next step. I've heard people explain before, and again, White Bear's my baby, so I totally get it as a founder, but they'll say, my business is my baby, and you're giving it new clothes, you're helping it grow up, you're teaching it how to speak, you're telling it how to behave. And that's when we really get involved, when you're at that stage that you want to scale and accelerate at speed. That's when it's the right time to come to us. Often we might say, as I said, maybe you're not ready, or we might say maybe you need a new name, or maybe we might ask a number of challenging questions. But whatever stage you are at, we are happy to have a chat. Hope that answered your question, Manish.
Anonymous says, why are so many high-end brands, e.g. fashion, going through blending with their logos? What are the benefits?
This is a really, really topical one that I do get asked quite a bit. And I personally am not a fan of blanding. I do feel blanding doesn't work in FMCG, where we need to be talking to taste and appetite appeal. We need to feel foodie. We need to feel, we need to tap into a lot of emotion and storytelling. However, there is certain merits to it, in my opinion, in the fashion world, where I know Burberry's just gone through another rebrand, but where you've seen your Balenciagas, your Yves Saint Laurents, all of these going through this branding process where they're actually taking away a lot of their equity and their legacy, be it from founder signatures or whatever it might be, and moving towards this kind of sans serif look and feel. And while this is a lot blander, there is reasoning for it. Reason being, a brand is what you think of it. A brand is what lives in your mind. It's how you make, how it makes you feel. And in the world of fashion, that is constantly changing, constantly evolving, and is very trend centric, and we need to make sure that our logo mark and logo type is essentially a holding shape or a holding place for the expression of creativity and of trends, and essentially it needs to not emit too much of a style or a feel to it, but be an invitation for people to come in and get into the world of Balenciaga, for example. So a lot of them firstly have moved towards being more digitized. So a lot of those old fashion brands that are kind of use signatures, etc., aren't made for the digital world. So there's a certain amount of evolution that needs to happen from a legibility point of view. And secondly, it's because they're moving to this kind of fashion house style, this kind of monolithic brand style that then leaves it open for expression when it comes to fashion, really. So there is benefits to it, but there's certain worlds it doesn't lend itself to ownability. So it depends on what your product or your service is as to what's the right outcome.
The
Thank you,
next one,
Anonymous.
I think this is just a comment, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Yogita. Yogita says she would love advice on how to disrupt with automated doors and gates. Well, Yogita, get typing, send that email to Kelly and be one of the three that she would give 30 minutes to. And then the last one, Kelly, is from Matt. Matt says, Kelly, you seem to be using VPs as strap lines. Would these not be internal only? Or do you see it important that VPs are marketing ready?
Yes, Matt, that is a really good question. Something I was going to actually elaborate on a little bit earlier. However, I just wanted to keep things really simple. So VPs often are internal, and then the articulation of them externally needs to have a layer of branding added to it, be it tone of voice, most often tone of voice. So when we create VPs, usually there's an internal articulation, which is a little bit less sexy, but is a springboard for an external articulation. And the external, we can either call the external value proposition, we can call it a tagline, we can call it a brand promise. There is a lot of different terminology out there. And yes, you're absolutely right. Internally, also the value proposition is often a lot more extended than just that one-liner. But yes, so internally and externally, VPs can be tweaked. Externally, normally there's a layer of tone of voice added to them, and they're a lot more consumer friendly.
Sorry, Kelly, I hadn't seen a couple more questions that came up, and we do have about 7 minutes to go. So Johnny says, my brother works in music management and all artists start as challenges they use. What do you bring to the world and why should anyone care? What do you think of this?
Johnny, I'm intrigued. So my brother works in music management and all artists start as challengers. Fair. Yes, get that. They use, what do you bring to the world and why should anyone care? I'm not really sure exactly what you're going towards, Johnny, but I guess what do you bring to the world and why should anyone care is that VP question. So what value do you add? Why are you different? Which essentially is what the whole talk is about, really. How do you differentiate yourself? There is no such thing anymore as like a USP, a unique selling position, but there is in terms of an ultimate strategic positioning. So it's not always what do you do that no one else does. It's often how do you position yourself differently for a specific audience. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Johnny, but I'd happily have a chat to your brother if he's trying to work out why he's different.
And then we've got Alessandro. What do you do when you have senior management asking for a rebranding based on their own personal opinion or feeling?
Sitsi, we've come across this a number of times.
Oh, too many times.
Yes, this happens all the time. So what do you do when senior management asks for a rebrand based on their own personal I mean, firstly, a brand audit is really important. So their own personal opinion, this can be dangerous, and getting stakeholder buy-in is why often a lot of the best rebrands don't meet the light of day, because it comes down to personal opinion. So often it depends on the size of the business, but often we would structure a senior leadership group for the rebranding project, and they would make the final decisions, because we don't want design by committee. Often at later stages towards the end of the branding, so that it's not as subjective based on one founder's or one owner's or one CEO's opinion. You can bring it to testing. Obviously, testing is sometimes the place where brands can go to die. So make sure that you're not asking what color do you like, or do you I don't know, do you like the photo of this person? You need to make sure that those testing questions are a lot broader. Would this drive you to buy? How does this brand make you feel, etc.? But testing is often a way that we've got jumped through those hoops in terms of giving validation to broader members of the team who are trying to steer a project. We did have a project recently that was tricky, and the founder was dead set in one way of articulating the brand and in one way of visually showing the brand. And we did do some testing. We also did some brand education and really supported the CMO and the team in terms of empowering them to push back on the CEO and say there's a lot of valid reasons and why we're doing X, Y, and Z. So I guess another really good way of looking at it is always having your strategy and your positioning crystal clear. So therefore it doesn't come down to subjective opinion. If your strategy is we're going after this audience, this is what they like, this is what they're demanding, this is how we're talking about ourselves, and that's all validated, then when a question comes down to I don't like this color, or I do like this, or I don't like that, they become nearly irrelevant because it's about aligning with the strategy and what the audience wants. Again, I hope that it's always hard when it's just a one-way conversation. I hope that helps, Alessandro, and I'm happy to have a further conversation if you want any more color on that. I think we're nearly at time now, unless Tsitsi, did you spot any others?
No, I was just going to say that, yes, that initial chat that Kelly offered is free to the first three.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have a chat with anybody. So have a chat with anybody. It's just that detailed audit is available for those first three for free, but happy to have conversations with everybody, myself or the team, and see how we can help. But that rigorous audit process that we go through with the brands that we work with, we will offer free to the first three.
And I think those are all the questions. I hope I haven't left anyone out. I'm scrolling up and down, but it looks like I've covered all of them. Thanks, Kelly.
Not at all. You're a superstar. Cheers. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye.